I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of Australia and their connections to land, sea, sky, and community. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening today. Welcome to the April and Fritz podcast. I am incredibly honoured to have you here. My name is Bree and I'm a floral designer, event lover, and business owner. I am the owner and head designer here at April and Fritz, a floral design studio based in Melbourne, Australia. We cater to all different types of events, from weddings to funerals to private functions and corporate events and so much more. While there are, many florists out there who specialize in particular events, for example, like weddings, my business has a different goal: to be with you for every event. And I found that one-off jobs were probably just that little bit too transactional for me. And so my business is really built on getting to not only the skill of floristry, but the soul of it as well. And so we help clients to make meaningful connections to the flowers and the celebration that they're hosting. Because of this, we have a pretty unique design process and only take on a limited number of events per year to give them our full and undivided attention. And to be honest, I never thought about having a podcast. It was just never something that interested me. And if I'm being even more honest, I actually used to kind of hate podcasts. So the irony is not lost on me that, now I am here doing a podcast, I guess. But in the last 12 months, I have gone a bit bananas for podcasts, if I'm being completely honest. I think what was probably missing for me was that up until about 12 months ago, I hadn't really heard anybody that I resonated with, and I hadn't really heard of any topic or anything like that I really just needed to know more on. And so when I started my business around, just over a year ago now, I started listening to business podcasts because I wanted to learn more about having your own business. And it felt like my world just kind of expanded. And so I guess I kind of started to fully understand the whole podcast thing, why everybody was raving about it, what they loved so much about it, and why they spent hours listening to somebody talking at them. So I finally understood the hype and kind of why everybody was raving about podcasts. And I guess I found people that I resonated with and that I loved listening to. And so I'm really hoping that I can be that for you. And so you might be wondering, how do we even get on to creating a podcast when I didn't even love them to begin with? But as I kind of said, having had my own business now for just over a year, I just love the idea of being able to connect with clients and potential clients as well, peers and friends, some more. It's really that connection piece, I think, that really gives me so much energy, and there's only so much connection that you can make from a reel or a story or whatever. And so this is just really another tool for us to connect. I never really thought of myself as any kind of designer when I started floristry, to be totally honest. I had a corporate background. I had no experience other than what I did for myself, and I'd never even run my own business, but I started one. So my dream really started to come true when April and Fritz was created. So in this episode, I'm going to be sharing a little bit about my story, how I kind of got to where I am, and the lessons that I've learned along the way. This will help you understand how my business was born and a little bit more about me as well. But before we get into that, I think that, this is the very first episode of my first ever podcast, and I want to make this a space where we can really get to the skill and soul behind creating your dream event. So in each episode, I'm going to be, equipping you with the knowledge and kind of creative insights to help you make well-informed decisions and confidently navigate the details of your upcoming event. It's about empowering you through some pretty candid conversations about styles, designs, and trends. And lastly, I really want you to get inspired by sharing some real life stories of creating unforgettable moments from my own business, April and Fritz. So I would so love it if you subscribe to this podcast, as we'll be releasing new episodes every week. Again, I'm just so excited that you're here and spending your earbud time with me. So let's get started. Okay, so to get to this point today, I kind of have to go back to the beginning. And my love of nature and the outdoors really started from quite an early age, I would say. Some of my earliest memories are living at my grandparents' property in a really tiny town called Monagita. Honestly, there's like a fire station there, 2 neighbours and a general store. So very, very tiny, regional kind of Victoria. And the house was this old weatherboard, 2-bedroom house, which had a garden that kind of wrapped the whole way around the house and a bonsai nursery and a field with just like the best climbing trees you can possibly imagine. There were dogs and foxes and chickens and all sorts of things. So my 2 grandparents, my auntie, my brother, my mum, we all lived in this 2-bedroom place for a period of time. And honestly, how we all managed to fit, I will never be able to figure out. But to me, it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. I went and kind of got the eggs every morning from the chickens. I played in the field all day and spent time in the kitchen with my nana. And honestly, some of my best memories of my whole entire life are at that place. So the house was really kind of a meeting point or a gathering point, and every different type of event from our family and from our friends and all of these kind of things were at that place, whether it be like engagements or funerals or, birthday parties or whatever. And I just kind of always remember that feeling of home. And I don't know, it was palpable to me. And I think back to those memories now, and it's something that I hold so dear. And so eventually, it was probably getting that little bit crowded. And so we moved to a small country town where I had a fairly, I guess, regular kind of upbringing, I guess. It was a town where it felt like if I was going to be staying, I was potentially going to have a pretty boring life, to be honest. And that's like no shade. I just didn't want that for myself. I had friends, I had casual jobs, so had all the usual things that you would expect for a child and a teenager. But I guess I just kind of wanted a little bit more out of life, to be, more successful and travel more, I suppose. And so at the age of 19, I probably couldn't have been more ambitious, if I'm being totally honest. And I went to uni in Geelong to study a Bachelor of Commerce, majoring in HR. And that's kind of where I spent the next 3 years. I loved that time in my life because I just had so much freedom. Geelong was really nice. It was like beachside, like, all these kind of things. And I just made so many beautiful friends there as well, which I'm, definitely still friends with today. And it was amazing for that period of time. And it was exactly what I needed and what I wanted. But eventually it did get old, and I found myself kind of still wanting more, I guess. And, I had a decent job. I was in a long-term relationship and everything was perfect on the outside, but I just wasn't really happy. And I think it really came down to me being this ambitious person that I am, and knowing that I wanted to see everything that the world had to offer me, and I wanted to go out and experience it. So I kind of left Geelong, left my life behind there, and went ahead and went traveling. So I ended the long-term relationship, packed up my bags, and left to go backpacking overseas. I would travel Europe for a solid 6 months, kind of before eventually calling London home. And backpacking was a pretty incredible experience for me personally. I just felt like my world kind of expanded, I guess. And for the first time, probably in my whole entire life, I had true alone time. And it's the kind of alone time where, you're going to the movies alone, you're eating dinner in a restaurant alone, and it gives you an opportunity, I think, to go really deep into yourself. And it was hard. Don't get me wrong. I loved my life. It was amazing waking up and being like, which city should I go to today? But, it was also really difficult, not being able to share those experiences with somebody, whether it be a family member or a friend or whoever. But I do think that at that point in time, it was exactly what I needed. So once that whole backpacking stint was over, I ended up moving to London, and London really just expanded my world even further. Within a couple of months of being there, I had an interview with a global tech company, which starts with G and ends in oogle if you're playing along at home. But it was the most terrifying interview of my entire life. And honestly, I thought I had completely stuffed it up. Like, literally, as I left that interview, I remember calling my best friend Blake and being like, oh, well, like, that was a great experience. Like, you live and you learn, like, kind of thing. And honestly, I was just so excited because I got to see the inside of the offices. But literally the next day I had an offer and would end up working there in the recruitment team for a year, maybe a year and a half, as a contractor. And so after which I was made permanent. And at that point in time, I kind of had two options. I could move back to Sydney, Australia, or I could move to Singapore doing the same kind of role. And for me, I just kind of felt like I wasn't really ready to go home yet. I wasn't ready to go back to Australia and kind of normal life, I suppose. I wanted to keep traveling. I was still really ambitious. I wanted to like just keep seeing what the world had to offer. And so that was it. Like, I was going to Singapore. I'd never even, to be honest with you, I'd never even been to London and I'd never been to Singapore, and I decided to move to those two places. And so when I made the decision to move to Singapore, I was kind of like, you know, London's been amazing. Like, what could possibly go wrong? You know, I've been so fortunate. Like, I love my life here. It's going to be even better when I go to Singapore. But when I moved to Singapore, honestly, like, everything changed. And I don't know how else to describe it, but I knew from the moment I stepped foot off that plane that it just like wasn't for me. I could just feel it in my gut. I don't know how or why or anything like that, but it just wasn't for me. And the next 2 years would kind of go on to be some of the worst of my life, to be honest. So I kind of gone from this, you know, dream life, living in the UK, traveling every weekend, really great friends, really great like work colleagues, everything, to being in Singapore where I didn't like my job. I didn't love the country. I hated the humidity, and it was just not for me. It was not for me. And I actually really fell into a pretty deep depression, and I was so anxious that some days I could hardly even leave the house at one stage. You know, I had friends there who are still my friends to this day, and, you know, they're amazing and I love them and, you know, all of that. I still had the travel aspect, which I really loved as well. So there were things there that I was kind of holding on to, I suppose. But I hardly spent any time in Singapore, honestly, because I just wasn't interested in being there. It just wasn't for me. It wasn't for me. And I think what was interesting about that time is that I think from the outside looking in, you know, I was on top in like so many ways. I had reached so many of my goals and my dreams, but I was completely miserable. And I think that's what was maybe one of the hardest things about that time, is that I had everything that I had ever dreamed of, but I honestly just felt like dead inside. I don't know how else to describe it. I longed to go back to Melbourne, and I longed to be with my family, and I longed to be with my friends, but I just couldn't give up my job. And, you know, I have gone over this 1,000 times in my head to try and figure out exactly what it was. And maybe it was kind of the fact that it had given me this dream life in the past, or maybe it was my pride or my ego, but I just couldn't really accept where I was and how I wasn't happy there. It just didn't make sense. Logically, it didn't make any sense to me. And so, honestly, my depression, it got so bad that, yeah, I was just like not in a good place, let's put it that way. And I started kind of going to therapy and having chats with like different counselors and that kind of thing. And that was really quite an interesting time. But one of them had actually suggested that I pick up a hobby of some kind to kind of try to, you know, put some roots down in this place so that I felt like I had something to like hold on to. And there was actually a painting studio down the road from where I lived. And I just decided to like take a class there, and then another class and another class. And honestly, I loved the painting. I was no good at it. Like, I need to show you some paintings that I've done. Like, they're not good by any means, but I did love it because I think it became a bit of a form of mindfulness. And I think I kind of started to discover a side to myself that was creative. And I had never really considered myself to be a creative person before at all. I was, ambitious and about business, and painting didn't really align with that. And so I think it kind of became a bit of an escape for me. And so I guess my savior in a lot of ways came in the form of what was so many people's heartbreak, which was COVID. And so when COVID hit Singapore, I literally got on the next flight out and I did not look back. Like, I left all my things behind. I just chucked a bag together, booked the flight, got on the flight, got out of there. And I didn't even say goodbye to anyone or anything. I just left. And it was honestly the best decision that I could have ever made. Like, there's just no two ways about it. It was the best decision that I ever made because it allowed me to have the right support systems in place, I suppose. I was still working at my job, but I took that role into Australia and just worked remotely, which, I was so, so fortunate. And, although I was so happy to be home, I was still in a pretty dark place, I think, mentally. And then a loved one in my life passed away. And so I had to suddenly kind of get on a flight to Perth and be there with that side of my family. And, then all the borders kind of closed down and there was no domestic flights, there was no international flights. It was like total shutdown across the country and the world. And so I ended up stuck in Perth for 9 months, which honestly was probably the best place in the world that I could have been because COVID didn't really even hit there. But I was staying with my dad, my stepmom, and my sisters for that period of time. And again, just like mentally, I was not in a great place. But I was just so happy to be home again, even if it wasn't really like my home or like somewhere that I had roots down. I felt really safe with my family, and it kind of just made me realize everything that I had missed out on in the last couple of years, kind of chasing this dream that really wasn't serving me in any way, shape, or form. And what I kind of realized about myself was that I'd kind of gone from this really fun-loving, extroverted, passionate person in London to kind of the worst version of myself in Singapore. And so I spent a lot of time kind of rebuilding myself, I think, in those 9 months, which eventually led, once we could travel again, heading back to Melbourne. And when I got home back to Melbourne, I actually stayed with my mum for 3 months to kind of get back on my feet and eventually get my own place in Carlton in Melbourne. And it was at this point in time that I was still working, full-time in my role as a program manager. And a large part of that was really about running events and kind of measuring their success and, like organizing logistics and this kind of thing for events. And that was my role. And it was in that apartment in Carlton that I kind of found myself again, my passion for life. My friends were around and I kind of forced myself again to get a bit of a hobby because I really wanted to, much like what the counsellor and the therapist had suggested in Singapore, kind of put some roots down in this place. I was so happy to be home, but it was weird moving back after so long. And, life had kind of changed after COVID and everything. So it was really up to me to kind of build my life from scratch. And I decided to get myself that little hobby, like I said, but instead of going down the painting avenue this time, I decided that floristry was what I wanted to do. And so I kind of picked that up. I think just like as a person, I have always kind of been drawn to interior design, aesthetically pleasing things, and any kind of beautiful photography. And so I'm not quite sure exactly how or when this interest in flowers kind of came about, but it did feel like all of a sudden I just like couldn't stop looking at flowers and like the design aspect of it. And I would scroll for hours through, all the different like social medias, looking at different photos of designs and looking at what was trending and beautiful locations where people were celebrating and all of this kind of thing. And I couldn't stop, honestly. I eventually decided that, I need to give this a go myself. not just be an observer, and signed up to do a short course at a local florist here in Melbourne who also has a bit of a florist school as well. If I'm being honest, I was really nervous. I was someone who has zero experience with flowers. I wouldn't consider myself at the time to be particularly crafty, but once I kind of got my hands on the flowers, it just felt so peaceful. It was like, again, just like that form of mindfulness. I could just be. And it was kind of a feeling that reminded me of when I was painting when I was based in Singapore, but it was more than that. It was like true calm. And so all I had to do, was pick up a stem and then place it with intention of creating something really beautiful. And so I fell in love with it, honestly. I took that short course, and then I took on another one, and then I went to another studio, and then I went to another studio, and eventually it was just kind of taking up all of my thoughts so much. And all I really wanted to do was watch videos of how to create these really beautiful arrangements and then go get some flowers and do it myself. And so eventually, I guess I kind of started to know that it was time to leave my technology job. I wanted to go ahead and study the Certificate 3 in floristry and see if it's something I could really, do for myself, I suppose. I knew that in order to do that, I still had to obviously be able to support myself. And so what I wanted to do was actually go part-time at work to allow me to study part-time, and literally was in the process of getting that all organized, one more signature on my part-time contract, and I would have been sorted. But I got notice that I was getting made redundant. And honestly, it was a bit of a blessing and a curse. I was so happy to have that decision made for me, because I don't know if I would have ever, maybe ever, have the courage to leave kind of this top job. But on the other hand, my confidence took a real hit. I went from being this kind of Google girl to unemployed, and 2 weeks later, I started the floristry course. And so in the first few months of the course, I was doing placement, where a large portion of my time was really spent replicating a head designer's design. And this was a fabulous experience. Like, there is nothing quite like learning how to actually do floristry from people who are more experienced than you. And I learned a lot. And I, to this day, continue to freelance, because I do think that it is important to be continuously learning. But ultimately, I knew that I had to kind of work for myself. I'd worked for one of the best companies in the world, and I knew that there was no option for me to work for anybody else. I just kind of had to be my own boss. Not only because of the fact that I just didn't want to replicate other people's designs, but I wanted more autonomy. I wanted more autonomy on the designs that I was creating, and, work with the clients directly. And that was kind of how I landed there. I wasn't going to get that by continuously freelancing or by working with other people. It really had to be mine. And so within 3 months of actually starting my course, I began the hunt for my business name. And believe me when I say that I searched and I brainstormed and I chat GPT'd and all of the different things, but just nothing. And I would kind of land on a name and then would be over it in like a week. I cannot even tell you how many times I created like an Instagram account and then just kind of looked at it for a while, like a week or whatever, and then was like, oh, no, I hate it, and like deleted it. And so I kind of had to really dig that little bit deeper, I think, and, ask myself the question, like, why is it that I even like nature? Why is it that I like floristry? Why is it that I like the outdoors? Like, what is it? And my mind would always be cast back to my grandparents, and, that nostalgia and the love of the outdoors all came from them. I wanted it to be something to do with them, because they were the ones who kind of gifted me this love, I suppose, of the outdoors and, tending to your garden and all of those different things. but I simply just could not figure it out. I could not figure it out what this name was going to be. And so I went home and looked through my mum's old photo albums. I was really kind of looking for a bit of inspiration, and I was flicking through old pictures of me as a child. I came across a photo of my brother and I, and we're sitting in front of my grandparents' property as kids. And we're just sitting in front of the rose garden where, I spent so much time kind of tending to it, smelling the roses and just playing outside there. And beside us were April and Fritz, my grandparents' dogs. And so I guess I kind of knew in that moment, it had to be them. It had to be them. I attribute my whole business to my grandparents. They are the reason why I think I came home to myself, and they are the reason I love what I do so much. And now I know that, not everybody is going to name their business after, their pets, but it was about so much more than that. It was what they represented. And so right there was the birth of my brand, April and Fritz Floral Design. And so since then, I have spent a lot of time refining my skills, my style, building this business, and kind of living this dream life that I had honestly always thought was just a dream and that could never actually be reality. But since then, I have kind of spent every waking moment thinking about April and Fritz and how I can kind of bring that sense of home and nostalgia and, sentiment, I suppose, to every moment in life. And it's what really drives me to create these moments for my clients. It's honestly just about so much more than the flowers. And so that's what I'm hoping to share with you on this podcast. I want to give you my knowledge and my insights so that you can make better decisions and feel confident in terms of what decisions you're making when you're going through the details of an upcoming event. And so that's what I'm hoping to share with all of you on this podcast. It's really about me giving you my knowledge and my insights so that you can make better decisions and really feel confident in them when you're going through the details of your upcoming event. It's about having honest conversations with you about certain styles and designs and trends that are kind of surfacing. And believe it or not, it's actually okay not to follow trends. I will say that. But mostly I really want to leave you, each week with this podcast feeling inspired, hearing other people's projects and experiences and kind of what's coming out of my business, April and Fritz. And so I would so love it if you hit subscribe to this podcast. You'll be able to hear the latest episodes drop, which are all coming soon. And so your support really does mean the world to me. If you, are curious to learn more about me or April and Fritz, you can head over to our website at aprilandfritz.com.au. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to the very first episode of the April and Fritz podcast. As an exclusive gift, we're offering you up to $100 off item hire, such as vases, plinths, pots, urns, and so much more for one event. To access, all you need to do is submit an inquiry and share the code word FLOWERPOD. Offer ends on the 1st of June 2025, minimum spends apply. See the full terms and conditions over at aprilandfritz.com.au/flowerpod.